Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. A very warm welcome to Phoenix Webinar Travel episode on Around the World in 21. I'm Athena Tan, I'm your host for today. Before we go into the theme of the day, as part of the Phoenix series, I will take you through some key landscapes and landmarks of UTown. The concept behind UTown is to create a lively intellectual, social and cultural environment that distinguishes the university through excellence in learning and student engagement. I'm now currently standing on a former golf course. Opened in August 2011, UTown is strategically integrated with NUS Cambridge campus via Link Bridge. This is also where 4,000 people live, work and learn in close proximity. Take a look at the scenic view of lush greenery around me. This is one of the green building projects undertaken by NUS. UTown is an educational hub complete with residential spaces, teaching facilities and study clusters. Come, let me show you around.
I am ready for
Clearly, UTown prides itself for its environmental-friendly architecture and is an integrated community of living, working and studying. Now, let's go into today's theme. Today's episode would be highly relatable to many of you. I'm sure to various degrees we have experienced how COVID-19 has changed our lives, not only to us as individuals but also to businesses. The travel industry is one of the greatest impacted, with public movement heavily restricted despite countries slowly reopening its borders in phases. In today's episode, we seek to examine the economic and societal risks of international travel in COVID-19 environment in 2021. And we are pleased to invite three guest speakers to share their thoughts and expertise. First up, we have Associate Professor Ng Wee Tong from NUS Saw Swee Hock School of Public Health. Prof. Ng has a wealth of experience working in occupational medicine, first in the Republic of Singapore Air Force and then in the commercial sector, and is also a specialist in aviation medicine. A key part of his current role is to provide translational expertise and generate evidence for policy formulation related to workplace safety and occupational health and well-being. In today's episode, he will be sharing his outlook on international travel in 2021 and also the salient risk considerations to be mindful of when traveling for work. So, let me start off by welcoming Prof. Ng and asking him a few questions. Prof. Ng, COVID-19 vaccination is out. What does this mean for international travel in 2021? Are we getting some good news?
Even if there is an early introduction of a vaccine, we are unlikely to see travel in 2021 revert immediately to pre-COVID norms. Let us look at the best case scenario, where there is an early global introduction of suitable vaccines. Firstly, while the most promising vaccine candidates are showing good effectiveness in protecting the individual who has been vaccinated, the vaccine producers have been cautious to warn that they cannot yet ascertain that following vaccination, if that person can still be a carrier of COVID-19. So it will take a bit more time to answer that question. Secondly, the ability of countries to produce, purchase, distribute and implement a vaccine will be quite different from country to country. If you combine this with the previous point about still being a carrier, you can see that the simple idea of vaccination allowing unrestricted travel remains complicated. If a country allows you in without restrictions, just because you are vaccinated, but you are still able to be a carrier, then that country's population is still at risk. A country will only truly begin to relax their border measures when either they are reasonably confident that vaccinated people cannot be carriers, or by achieving herd immunity in their country by vaccinating a significant number of their own population.
I see. Patience is virtue here, it seems. So what about travel bubbles and bilateral travel arrangements?
We have seen countries experiment with bilateral travel arrangements, what we have been calling safe lanes or travel bubbles. This concept is an interim solution to minimize quarantine restrictions and reopen economies. It is ironic, but by its very name, travel bubbles are fragile. For example, the initial launch of the Hong Kong-Singapore travel bubble was postponed before it even had a chance to start due to a sudden increase in cases in one of the countries. Thus, we can view travel bubbles as temporary windows for essential work travel rather than long-term solutions. Another feature that will shape the travel landscape will be the arrangements for pre-departure and after-arrival COVID testing for the traveller. A lot of global research effort has gone into developing reliable tests that can be done as quickly and as cheaply as possible. Until we have global herd immunity to COVID-19, testing will still have a part to play. Even with a vaccine rollout in 2021, you should expect pre- and post-travel testing to still be a feature of border control measures for some countries.
I can already feel the weird sensation from nose swab already. Prof Ng, how do I decide if I should travel for work?
I'm going to assume up front that the work travel is important and cannot easily be substituted by remote conferencing or virtual platforms. If you are then doing a personal risk assessment for work travel, there are some considerations to think about. The first thing is to check the COVID situation at your destination. In Singapore, because we are so small, we're not used to treating other cities as individual locations, rather than being part of, say, United States, India, or China. Thus, if you are traveling to an individual city, then you need to get the latest update on that specific city, rather than assess your risk based on just the whole country's data. As an example, although certain cities in the United States may have high COVID infection rates, there are parts of the country that have a much lower rate and thus a lower risk profile. Another aspect to consider is the public health behavior and attitudes of your host, as well as the people you are expecting to meet. We have seen worldwide cultural differences to the adoption of public health measures like wearing masks, crowd restriction, and social distancing. Not every community adopts the same level of measures. We also need to be mindful not to stereotype an entire country's attitude to public health measures based on mass media portrayal alone. Talk to the people that you intend to meet, or your host, if it's an event that you're being invited to understand what the local prevailing attitudes are like. Lastly, you do need to prepare for the worst case scenario. If you become symptomatic with COVID at your destination, what is your assessment of the medical facilities in the location that you are visiting? While it goes without saying that medical evacuation back to Singapore should be something you have included in your travel insurance, the potential speed of progression of COVID means that you will have to be managed medically at your destination in the early days of your illness until evacuation can be arranged. Overall, there is no one-size-fits-all approach to assessing your risk when you're traveling during a global pandemic. The situation is fluid and changes quickly as countries try to balance public health concerns with the adverse economic impact of their control measures. The new normal will not be a static set of rules or norms in 2021, but rather a continuously changing picture as the world tries to defeat this virus.
These tips will certainly be useful to me in preparing for work travel. So Prof Ng, I used to travel to multiple countries on the same day. Will I be able to do this in 2021?
Yes, you can, theoretically. There is no specific restriction that will prevent you from doing this. However, it will be the logistical hurdles that will continue to influence the efficiency of air travel. Let's say that you wish to travel from country A to country B and then to country C, all in the same day. Given the global reduction of scheduled flights, you may not be able to book such an itinerary. Secondly, even if you were to book such a schedule, you will have to factor in all the additional time required for COVID testing at your various arrival and departure destinations. Of course, you will also have to make sure that there are no quarantine requirements at these countries that you wish to travel to. Therefore, travel to multiple countries on the same day would be possible, but you will need to be aware of the inconveniences and challenges.
Thank you, Prof. Ng, for your insightful take on the key travel risk considerations amidst the pandemic. Next up, we are pleased to invite Dr. Loh Kiang Wei, Medical Director at International SOS. He oversees the clinical governance of all current and new medical services projects under the Singapore Division Management, as well as the current developments of digital projects including telehealth and medical technology solutions in Asia. Dr. Loh will be sharing his insights on the COVID situation on the ground in China, Europe and US, which I am sure are key destinations for many staff and students in NUS. Dr. Loh, please.
So now, I will give a short update on the COVID and vaccine situation in US, Europe and China. The situation in China has remained relatively stable over the last few months. There remains community and imported cases reported daily, but there has been no significant spike or sustained increases. International SOS analysis has also noted constant 5-day moving averages, and our resurgence warning marker stays at low risk. Authorities continue to monitor possible hotspots, most recently in Hainan. In November, there were sporadic cases in districts of Shanghai, Tianjin, and Inner Mongolia, while in December, local cases were reported in Sichuan, as well as Heilongjiang. China has practiced mass dragnet testing, and that means testing large number of people at short notice, upon the detection of any cases. It is therefore extremely important for any traveller to continually monitor the situation before and during travel. It is also important to note that international arrivals into China now require 2 forms of COVID testing, both PCR as well as IgM antibody tests, taken within 48 hours of arrival. And this is on top of the usual border and quarantine controls. Europeans who are looking forward to Christmas free from COVID-19 lockdowns will largely be disappointed, with persistent high infection rates across the continent obliging governments from London to Stockholm to strengthen or maintain restrictions on free movement. Italy, Germany and the United Kingdom remain in the global top 10 of the most affected countries, and we may well see more draconian measures come into place across Europe. The worsening situation in the US post-Thanksgiving has also underscored fears that European countries will see a post-Christmas surge. The situation is especially prominent in Germany, which reported record daily COVID-19 deaths the preceding week. In the United Kingdom, the number of cases are rising again after flattening in the wake of the November lockdown. Italy surpassed the UK as the European country with the worst toll of fatalities just this Sunday, but seemed to be doing the best of the trio with downtrending new case numbers. Outside of the top 3 affected European countries, our analysis shows that most of continental Europe remains out of containment, with 5-day moving average new case numbers remaining stubbornly high, or not decreasing at a sufficient rate. France, for example, has decided that the easing of restrictions scheduled for December 15th will not happen in light of recent COVID-19 infection figures. Testing and hospital capacity remain an issue and ongoing concern. Positivity rate of tests for most European countries remain above the 5% threshold recommended by the WHO. The WHO recommended in May that testing positivity rate should remain less than 5% for 2 weeks before governments even consider reopening measures. COVID-19 hospital occupancy is now falling in many European countries, but levels remain high risking crisis in event of winter or post-Christmas surge. 99% of ICU beds in Stockholm are full, and the number of mechanical ventilation beds in the UK occupied by COVID-19 patients remain roughly similar to 1 month ago. The situation in the US continues to worsen by all metrics: new cases, deaths, and hospitalizations. As new milestones are reached, even with improvement in much of the Midwest, there are escalating outbreaks in the Northeast, the South, and on the West Coast. The nation is seeing steady case growth and explosive increases in deaths, with daily numbers higher than the 5- and 7-day moving averages. Testing positivity rates currently hover around 10%, higher than the recommended threshold. Hospital capacity remains an ongoing issue, with limited availability of intensive care beds. This is against a backdrop of a population that has refused to follow medical advice to wear masks and avoid crowds, despite more than half of the US states recently introducing or resuming restrictions to try to curb the rampant spread of the virus. Numbers are anticipated to get worse over the holiday period. Much hope rests on the rollout of the COVID-19 vaccine. In a record year, we have 49 candidates in human clinical trials, with several in phase 3, which is usually the last stage before approval. The vaccinations can be broadly divided into 5 groups, some of whom are using novel vaccine technology. 5 of the vaccine candidates have released efficacy data, and some have been approved in various countries. The US FDA has issued emergency use authorization for the Pfizer-BioNTech vaccine in individuals of 16 years or older. Vaccine shipments started on Sunday, with 3 million doses expected to be sent out. Healthcare workers and elderly residents of long-term care homes are first in line to receive the inoculation of a 2-dose regimen given about 3 weeks apart. The US has secured 100 million doses, and it is projected that about 30% of the US population could be immunized by the end of the first quarter of 2021. In addition, it is anticipated that the US FDA would approve the Moderna vaccine for emergency use in the coming days, following comments by the head of Operation Warp Speed. Over in Europe, the UK was the first nation to grant emergency authorization to the Pfizer-BioNTech vaccine on 2nd of December and started vaccinations for frontline workers and the elderly on 8th December. The UK has secured 40 million doses, and it is anticipated for 5 million vaccinations to take place by the end of this month. Authorization is pending for the Moderna and Oxford AstraZeneca candidates, but approvals are expected before the end of the month as well. The European Medicines Agency, which oversees approving COVID-19 vaccines for the European Union, has criticized the speed of approval. It had given the date of 29th December for its decision for the Pfizer vaccine and 12th January for the Moderna vaccine, citing the need for more evidence and more checks. This timeline is, however, expected to be shifted forward. In China, an emergency program has allowed more than 1 million people to be immunized with domestic vaccines such as Sinovac and Sinopharm, even as final authorization is pending. With infection rates remaining low in the country, the Chinese vaccine firms are carrying out tests in dozens of other countries, including Brazil, Indonesia, Turkey, and Russia.
Thank you, Dr. Loh, for your sharing, and we hope the audience has gained a deeper understanding of the latest situational updates on the COVID pandemic in major regions around the world. Our last speaker for today is Ms. Shamishta Sivaramakrishnan, or Mishti in short, a Singaporean who has been raised, studied and worked in the Middle East, Europe, South and Southeast Asia. She is passionate about global governance and public policy through cross-sectoral cooperation and has previously worked at organizations such as World Economic Forum, the United Nations and Ashoka Changemakers. Mishti will be sharing her perspective on how the disruption to business travel has impacted young professionals like herself, how we can travel in a more sustainable manner and creating value from the trips we do make. Over to you, Mishti.
I want to start by acknowledging the beauty and benefits of travel. The opportunity to immerse oneself in multiculturalism, feel a sense of culture shock, and challenge one's prescribed cultural identity are all priceless sentiments. But while travel is a wondrous thing, I also feel that a sense of habitat can be found within oneself. For example, within the confines of your own neighborhood or city. This being said, the evolution of travel as a result of the pandemic presents different questions for travel, that is for work. For me, I feel as much a product of my travels as I do of the anchors I was able to place in the countries I've lived in and traveled to. And as Pico Iyer says, home is not the place you live, home is what lives inside of you. Work comprises a significant portion of our lives, and work travel has become such a fundamental characteristic of the way in which we do business and grow in our professional lives. For me, work travel has been enriching. It has let me opportunities to think on my feet when responding to challenges, connect with collaborators from other offices, and step outside the comfort of my known physical space. And so, the key questions we should be asking ourselves as we think about work travel are the following. If you look at your 2021 calendar, how are you reprioritizing travel requirements in a way that is less risky? Assuming the vaccine may or may not be available throughout 2021, would you reprioritize higher risk countries, example, countries with higher number of cases, further down on your work travel list? How are we continuing to supplement our lives and our workplaces with digital tools, even past this pandemic? This might lead you to wonder how you can find enrichment in work without traveling, especially if you're in a role that has been designed to be travel heavy. The 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development offers a really important framework for thinking about your travel habits. The agenda is not only important for the global community in being the first intergovernmental agenda of its kind, but it also provides us with a list of aspirational targets of how we should and can develop. This type of development as a community can only happen if we pause and rethink our travel habits, starting with our work. The bottom line here is that we will need to be more hands-on with our travel planning and organization, going beyond flight and hotel bookings, and instead thinking about how we can take care of ourselves while taking care of livelihoods and the broader economy. So how do we do this? First, it starts with creating value from the trips that we do decide to make. I've traveled a lot in my life and know all too well that it can be hard to control our travel, sometimes due to work obligations, sometimes due to personal challenges. But we need to seize the pandemic as an opportunity to really evaluate the trips we will make, not only in terms of our carbon footprint, but also the types of value that a trip could bring. While work-based travel offers integral collaboration opportunities with colleagues in other countries and offices, it also can provide us with new business opportunities. But the bottom line is that we need to be more conscious about how and when we design our work trips in order to continue pushing for sustainably conscious ways of doing business. More importantly, we need to ask ourselves value-focused questions when organizing a business trip itinerary. Thinking about who we're interacting with, how those interactions are fostering growth for yourself and for your organization, and the mitigation measures that you might need to adopt in order to ensure that safety remains the top priority. Second, travel is really about livelihoods too. While tourism fuels livelihoods, the externalities it creates can also destroy them. Travel going forward will need to be community conscious to protect those whose lives may depend on it. The type of travel that you or I embark on will need to be more productive, offering ways for people and places to flourish rather than be trapped in a growth paradox. And this begs the question, can travel ever be sustainable? Sustainable tourism means different things for different people. On a personal level, it's really important to think about the travel that you embark on and how it supports the community that might be hosting you. And while travel may seem like a short-term plan, the effects of your trips can be long-term, especially when thinking about environmental, economic, and social dimensions of community development. We can actually use professional travel as a means to further organizational progress on crucial sustainability indicators. For entrepreneurs, work-based travel offers a really great opportunity to enlist new partners while encouraging organic and innovative venture ideas that benefit the community. At the same time, remote work has offered us a chance to rethink the physical workplace and the ways in which we bring in stakeholders that we may sometimes have had trouble reaching or communicating with. A hybrid approach to making work travel as efficient and high value as possible will increase our resilience in the face of this pandemic and the next one. We can only do this if we reset our expectations of travel. Travel has become so easy in the last decade, and you could probably whip up a weekend trip within an hour of making a booking online. But we will need to reset our expectations of travel. Is your work-based trip fulfilling your immediate needs, or is it furthering actionable objectives and longer-term professional development? Are you making a trip just because you can afford it and want to get out, or are you making the trip because there's genuinely something that you could gain from the trip that your immediate surroundings may not offer you? And most importantly, have you taken a walk around your own block? In other words, with the tendency to turn to escapism, have you made time to explore and listen to your immediate surroundings and coworkers? Work-based travel is an important tool to drive stronger cross-border connections, but it can also be detrimental if we apply pre-pandemic behaviors. I want to conclude with a quote from one of my favorite books, Invisible Cities by Italo Calvino. For those who pass it without entering, the city is one thing. It is another for those who are trapped by it and never leave. There's a city where you arrive for the first time, and there is another city which you leave never to return. Each deserves a different name. This quote applies to how we shape our travel habits going forward, how we contribute to the spaces that we occupy, professional or personal, but also how we contribute to cities that host us for work or collaborative opportunities at large.
Thank you, Mishti, for your sharing. Italo Calvino's quote certainly resonates with me, and it is refreshing for us to hear your perspective on the essence of work-based travel, as well as the impact of business travel disruption in today's challenging COVID environment. We now have a live Q&A session where the panel of speakers are available to answer any other questions you may have.